This podcast is sponsored by and recorded at Crossings Pub and Eatery on Hyde Park.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you may be listening. We welcome you back to another edition of The Vicar's Crossing, a virtual space where faith intersects with the public square. And once again, coming to you from Crossings Pub and Eatery on Hyde Park Road in London. And my name is Rob Henderson, and I'm the priest at Holy Trinity St. Stephen's Anglican Church in London.
Holy Trinity, Batman. I'm Kevin George, and I'm the priest at St. Aidan's Church in London, Ontario.
Good. Now
we know
where you are.
Yep.
We can move on.
We can move on.
We figured that part out. Good. And we're glad we're back again with Ian. How you doing, Ian?
Doing all right?
Producer Ian.
Producer Ian,
Yeah.
counting the days down to the end of school.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
He's going to be a graduate.
You will be.
Yeah.
How
Great
crazy.
movie, by the way, The Graduate. Have you watched it?
Say that again?
The Graduate. It's a movie. Look it up.
Okay, I put it on my list.
It's an old movie, but you should watch it.
I said to Ian, there will come a day when you'll drive by that high school years from now and look and say, how did I get through that?
Yeah. And you'll
We all
also
do it.
say,
We all do it.
thank God,
Thank God I got through that.
or thank the heavenly being, or thank the universe, or whatever it is you like to thank.
And after we thanked everyone, we're glad everyone's back with us for another edition of the show. We've got another guest to invite in. So why don't you just introduce our guest, Kevin, and then we'll get to some other business we got to take care of.
Alrighty, well, we got John Marsh with us today, and John is coming to us from the Diocese of New Westminster. So he may have the distinction, I think, of traveling the longest distance to be a guest on the Vicar's Crossing.
And you made it in time, John.
I did, but it's amazing seeing as I've got a damn cane.
Yeah, you did well with the damn cane and all. John is a native to London here in Ontario, but has been living in Vancouver now for nearly 20 years.
Okay.
And working in that diocese, and we're thrilled that he's back and have the opportunity to be with him. John I've known for about 25 years when I was a student at St. Michael and All Angels Church here in London, and John was the rector, and that's how we got to know each other, and from then we've continued to build a strong friendship. So
What was Kevin like as a young
He was an asshole.
young priest? That's what I thought. Yeah. So everything's pretty much consistent.
well, things have stayed pretty much the same. Some things change, some things never change.
That's right. Good.
Yeah.
Good. All right, John. Well, welcome. We're glad you're here today,
Thank
and
you.
we'll be chatting more with you coming up here in just a second. A couple of things though we want to talk about. We've got a special contest going on, don't we?
We have an incredible contest right now. We have, I should say, first of all, we've added a new sponsor.
Yes.
And that new sponsor is Aleppo Restaurant, which is at the corner of Oxford and Wonderland. And for you folks who are here listening in London, it is the best Middle Eastern food in the city. It's cooked on a charcoal fire, so it's the only one in town doing that. Incredible people, Tony and Shireen, who were over there, are great. And they're excited to join and partner with Crossings here as sponsors of the Vicar's Crossing. And they happily put up a $25 gift certificate, as well as Crossings put up a $25 gift certificate. And Rob and Ian and I have put up a couple of nice hoodie jackets, or a one hoodie jacket and a T-shirt.
T-shirt. Yep.
For the winner. And how you win is you subscribe to the podcast. So
Right.
if you're already listening to this and you're a subscriber, send along a tweet or a Facebook message or even an email to us to just let us know that you've subscribed, and we will enter you to win. And perhaps you can invite a friend along to do the same, and your friend can enter too. We're going to draw on the 28th of May, which is at our synod. Those of you who are members of the Diocese of Huron know that our annual synod meeting is taking place at the end of May. And we will be at synod, and we're actually going to record a podcast at synod.
We are.
And on the 28th, we'll draw for the winner of that. So help us build our subscriber list. We've picked up about 50 in the last week. So
That's great.
let's
Yeah,
pick up some more. Get the word out, get people to subscribe.
Good. And hopefully you'll be walking away with some swag.
And
Some
food.
Vicar's Crossing swag, some food.
Yeah,
And you'll be the hippest cat in town.
you will.
Da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Good. So we'll look forward to that. Do we want to get right into ask Ian anything? Because
Well,
are you ready, Ian, or do you
we
want to?
can, but before we do, I just want to say I have a new beer today.
Oh,
Here
yeah.
at here at Crossings Pub. By the way, we came in here today. They opened at noon today. They've been under
Yeah, they've
renovations all
redone
day.
the place.
Looks great. all freshly painted, new decor, new logos, new outside. They've done an incredible job. And they just opened for lunch today and are stressed to the hilts here. And but anyway, we went down and the taps have changed.
Right.
And so I am drinking something which is called Fat Tire. And I thought it might have been a personal statement about me when I saw it
Well, I
first.
chose it for you.
Oh, you chose?
Yeah.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a Fat Tire.
I'll say Kevin needs a fat tire.
I have a Fat Tire. It's an amber ale from New Belgium Brewery, which I'm told is in
Toronto.
Colorado or something. Or
No,
it
it's
says-
in Toronto.
Colorado,
Oh,
but
does
it's in
it?
Toronto.
Oh, okay. It's in Toronto.
And Rob is drinking what?
I'm drinking Steam Whistle, Canada's premier Pilsner.
Of course it is.
And John's enjoying a gin, the house's finest.
The house is fine. You get good gin here.
Gin and tonic.
Very good.
There you go.
And Ian's on with the Dad's Root Beer
Dad's
again.
root beer.
So
Once
cheers.
again, Dad has no root beer because Ian has already drank it.
Good for you. All right. And I also wanted to say a mention to Tally from the Anglican Journal.
Yeah. Oh, Tally Folkens.
Yeah, because I know he's been listening. He's got in contact with us, and we're looking forward to a special insert in the Anglican Journal, which is the national newspaper of the Anglican Church.
Yep.
And so he's written a little thing about what we're doing here. So we want to thank
Thank you,
him.
Tally.
And looking forward to reading that when it comes out in the next little
It'll
while.
be good.
So, good. All right, it's time now for another edition of, bring up the music, please, Ian.
There it
Ask
comes.
Ian anything.
Wow.
Wow.
Isn't that something? And today we have
feel
a
the
question
mood.
from a young listener from Byron, the Byron area of London.
Mm-hmm.
This person goes by the name Donna.
Oh, Donna.
Yeah, that. So, and Donna asked, Ian, your room is quite a mess. when do you anticipate cleaning it up?
When a pig talks to me while flying.
Oh, wow. So it ain't
He's-
gonna
there's
happen
a little
soon.
addendum on that one. I like that.
It ain't gonna happen
I
soon.
like that. So,
Well,
yeah.
you know, Donna, thank you for your question, and I sympathize with your problem.
Yeah.
But hopefully you're able to do something about that on the other end of this.
And Ian,
You know Donna?
you just lost the car for a week.
Yeah. Do you know Donna, Ian?
I'm fairly familiar with Donna. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
You live with Donna?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
We'll work on him, Donna. Don't worry. We'll take care of that. Good. All right, so it's time for another new segment on the Vicar's Crossing, which we've been having a lot of fun with over the last couple of shows.
What?
It's time for our segment called Trivial Priest, hosted by producer Ian.
Hello, that's me. So we've decided to test how trivial and how knowledgeable these priests are. In this regular feature, I will ask Kevin and Rob to choose a category between geography, entertainment, history, arts and literature, science and nature, and sports and leisure. At the end of September, we award the Canon Tavish.
Tavish. The man's name is Tavish.
Tavish, I'm sorry. Canon Tavish Most Trivial Priest Trophy to whoever has the most points. So at the moment, our score is tied.
Yeah, we're at
It's
1-1.
1-1.
1-1.
We're at 1-1.
And last year was last podcast we did 1980.
Yes.
Right, so we're up to 81.
So we're up
It's
to
81. So would our esteemed guest please choose a category for each of our priests?
Okay, for Kevin, I'm going to choose arts and literature.
Hey, there we go with that again.
And for Rob, I'm going to pick science and nature.
Oh, thank you
Oh,
very much.
come
Thank you very
on.
much.
The last time I got this arts and literature, it was some question about Edward Scissorhands. No. What was
All
it, John? You heard it. Wasn't Edward Scissorhands?
No, it was Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney Todd. Wow.
John
See,
knew it right
everybody
away.
else knows it, but you don't.
John said he was listening to it out in Vancouver, and you were screaming at your computer or something.
Yes, that's right. So,
Sweeney Todd, you idiot.
All right. So for Kevin, said
Okay.
arts and literature.
Yep.
Okay. Where is it? Here it is.
The pressure. So am I getting asked first because I won last week? 'Cause I'll take
You're
it.
getting asked first because you're on my right.
Okay, all right. Go for it, man.
That's the only reason.
Yeah, no worries.
Arts and literature is
Arts.
purple, right?
Yes.
Cool. That makes the most amount of sense. All right. What movie, adapted from a memoir written by daughter Christina, featured Faye Dunaway in the role of troubled Hollywood star Joan Crawford?
Okay. All
me
right. So
think
you
about
get
that
you
while
get a
you-
second to think about it.
Right. Now-
So fired me. Science and nature.
Science
huh?
and nature. Oh, right. That's green. Okay. What technology giant launched its PC in August, giving the Apple II new competition?
This is ridiculous.
Hallelujah.
I hold John.
Hallelujah.
I hold John personally responsible for this tragedy. This is a unfair competition.
Well, Ian and I conspired before, so
All right. So one more time. Ask me the question
Okay.
one more time.
What movie
Crawford.
adapted from a memoir written by daughter Christina featured Faye Dunaway in the role of troubled Hollywood star Joan Crawford?
The Titanic.
Mommy Dearest is
Mommy
the correct
Dearest.
answer.
Mommy
of
Dearest.
course.
There you go. That's what it is.
Of course.
But I mean, what's Rob's difficult question?
Rob, what technology giant launched its PC in August, giving the Apple II new competition?
Here, let me just put down this piece of fruit here. Apple.
No,
What?
man. They
IBM. Sorry. IBM.
IBM. They were
Give-
competing
What?
with Apple.
Competing
That's
with
what
Apple.
you said, though. Read the question again.
What technology giant launched its PC in August, giving the Apple II new competition?
Oh, new competition.
You
I
need to
thought you
listen
said.
better.
I
You
thought
need
you
to
said
listen better.
bringing the Apple to.
You know what?
Okay.
You know what? I feel okay now about Mommy Dearest.
All right.
Wow.
So we're still tied at 1.
We're still tied at
Wow.
one.
'Cause I
Except
got,
really, you
cotton in my
I
ears.
think I gain a point because you should. That was a softball.
That was a
I would have got it wrong. I got to confess.
I
would-
misheard that.
As I
Okay.
was going to say Microsoft.
Were you
Huh.
going to say Microsoft?
So I'd have been
yeah,
wrong.
you would have been wrong too.
Yep.
Yeah, I might not have said IBM.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
All right. 1-1.
1-1 still. Okay, moving on. So, John, welcome aboard.
thank you.
Sorry we had to drag you into this mess, but
I am too.
yeah, we'll pay for the counseling. It's all over.
Very good.
So, as Kevin mentioned, you're originally from London, but
Yep.
now serving out in New Westminster,
Yep.
British Columbia. And I understand, so you were ordained here in Huron, right?
Yep.
And you and I sort of have something in common about a certain parish in this area.
So I'm told.
Yeah, you started your ministry at?
St. Stephen's.
St. Stephen's,
We
yeah.
forget Holy Trinity. We were just St. Stephen's then.
Right, back in the day.
We didn't need to add to our names. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
all
so
right.
it's a while back.
Yeah, good. Maybe you could share a little bit more about yourself, your roots here in Huron, and what life is like having moved out west. I'm sure it's a different feel out there than it is here for sure.
Well, as you say, I'm from London, and for the first, 20 years, I was pretty much in this area with parishes. I was a chaplain up at Huron College, and during that time is when I was availing myself of educational opportunities here. So I've studied in the States and in Toronto and so on. And we moved to Vancouver because my then wife got a job. So I went along and ended up in Vancouver.
Okay.
And they've all moved from Vancouver, and I left in Vancouver.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
anyway,
Different lifestyle out there, different way of being, and
I will freely admit, I mean, being from southern Ontario, I really didn't think too much about places like Vancouver.
Yeah.
It was really a shock to me. Not so much the city itself, the culture of the city. It was the culture of the church I was completely surprised by, because people here would have an assumption that they would make that, the West Coast, or often called the left coast, was, cutting edge and everything. But when I went there, I found the Anglican Church, the diocese, to be really rather conservative and rather rigid, and all concerned about things that back here nobody would even worry about.
Really?
And so I was really surprised. So I was kind of like a fish out of water for
Right.
a long time.
right, yeah,
Probably I'm still a fish out of water, but perhaps for different reasons. But
right, right.
That's one hairy fish.
that's true.
So following up on that, I mean, I know what I had the opportunity to work with John as a student, as I said, for a couple of years over at St. Michael and All Angels, and some of the work that you were doing there, John, was really quite on the cutting edge of things then. And I got down here from the Diocese of Eastern Newfoundland and Labrador, and within a year, you left and flew out west, and I was like, what did I say? What did I do? But anyway, we've managed to continue to keep in touch, and I've always been impressed and inspired by John. And since I've moved to London, John has been back a few times, as he's still family here, and as he said, some of his kids are now in Waterloo. And when he's come to preach at St. Aidan's. And one of the first times he did a few years ago, I was taken by the fact that in a homily you gave there, you were talking about your current reality at St. Mary Magdalene. And the words you used when you began your sermon was, "I come to you from the ruins of the church." And I know a little bit about the history of the community in which you attend as a sacramental presence, as a priest there. Perhaps can you enlighten our listeners a little bit about what you meant by that and about St. Mary Mag's and what that community is, because it's really quite interesting and a particular ministry that's taking place out of that community.
Well, where I was at the time I probably said that was in a parish called St. Mark's. And as things start to dissolve, people don't like to admit to the fact that things are dissolving around them, we just, close our eyes and just assume everything is fine. So we're trying a number of different ways to partner parishes up and so on. So anyway, they had created what was called a cluster parish, which was essentially just 4 parishes coming together with a ministry team that was to function on a rotating basis through each of the parishes. And that was, in fact, a sign that things had started to break down, that the reason that we had a team working with 4 parishes is that not one of these 4 parishes could afford a priest. So they pooled their money and they try to get a couple of priests to try to sustain them. The bottom line is that one of the points was in Kitsilano in Vancouver. And if you're familiar with Kitsilano, it's kind of a hip kind of place. And back in the 60s, it was where all the hippies were. And now it's become a place where you too can buy a small condominium for $1.5 million.
Lovely. Yeah, just a nice starter.
But it's a kind of place where everybody is quote unquote spiritual. Like they'll all practice yoga and they'll all do this and they'll all do, those kinds of things. And then they go out Saturday night and get drunk and so on.
The SBNR.
It was probably one of the most difficult places to try to enact or embody whatever church might mean, because it means asking questions about what's going on with life. And the basic nature of that area was we don't want to ask any questions. We just want to kind of live within ourselves and do what we choose to do when we choose to do it. So it was a very tough place to begin to embody, because rightly understood, and this is, I think, the church has to own this, is that people have 1,001 projections as to what the church is. Most of them are sometimes they're actually just absolutely right. They're absolutely right as to what the church is. It is this closed-minded, self-righteous gathering of old people. But for those of us who are trying to ask other questions, who are trying to connect to the community, trying to have the community inform how we understood ourselves, inform how we understood worship, informed how we talk about God or whatever we wanted to talk about, it was a real difficulty, because these judgments, these assumptions, these preconceived notions would hit you right in the face before you could actually even, hi, I'm John, you just get this stuff hitting you. Mm-hmm. And it's very difficult to have an authentic conversation with anybody, because you're just wading through all the stuff that they brought with them. So,
Interesting. It's thinking back to all those years ago at St. Mike's. I remember I was telling John this the other day when I was at Huron, then called Huron College, later called Huron University College, now called Huron University. Pretty soon, it'll be just Huron.
Huron again.
But I had to pick a parish to go to for a parish internship placement, or whatever they called it, a field placement for 2 years. It was a 2-year thing then. Yeah. And a friend of mine was over at St. Andrew's Memorial and said, "Oh, you should go there." And so I applied to go to St. Andrew's Memorial. We'll reserve any further comment, but that's where I thought I would go. And
I'm biting my tongue.
And anyway, so in the meantime, my number 2 choice was St. Michael and All Angels, because at that time, John's then wife, Wendy, was one of my professors, and talked about the parish a lot and how what was going on there and how impressive. And as the Spirit would have it, that's where I landed, and I was very lucky, because I used to hear people talk about supervision, right? As you go once a week and you meet with the priest and you have supervision, and they say, "Oh, we just go for a coffee, and we just sort of laugh and have a good time and tell jokes and whatever," right? So I go and I meet John. The first time I met John, we went to what was then McGuinness Landing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And we it's closed now. God bless the place, just closed last year. But in those days we sat down by the fire and we knocked back a few pints, and by the time I left, I realized this wasn't going to be your average this wasn't going to be your average conversation, because it was very clear. I learned pretty quickly that supervision was always going to be that sort of exercise in theological reflection with John. It wasn't just simply talking about the weather or what our sports teams were doing or whatever else. And one of the things that John encouraged me to do, and has served me well over the years, was to ask a further relevant question. So, having become a friend of yours, John, one of the things that I value so much in you is your willingness to always question and to go the next level deeper. And I wonder if you can share a little bit about your willingness, or even your desire to always sort of engage the question. I mean, the reason I ask that is I think that in the church, at least some of the representations of it that many of us have lived in, is awfully focused on the answers, or at least feeling like they know the answer.
Let's be frank. The church tends to market itself as the one who has all the answers.
Right.
In fact, the long robes, I mean, those are those people who wear the long robes, which obviously means the three of us, we wear long robes. But
We don't know what Ian is wearing at night, though.
well, who knows? But at the end of the day, we're supposed to be the people who have the answers. And in fact, not only do we provide a question, then we provide the answer for them and call it the catechism.
Yes.
But that's actually, it's got everything's ass backwards. The bottom line is, if we're being truly honest about who and what we are, we haven't a damn clue what we're doing. We have actually no way of knowing what we're doing. We have no way of even knowing God. We don't know what we're talking about. But instead of that, seeing that as a critical flaw, we have to understand that that is a function of who and what we are. This is who we are. And the very best we can do is to continue to ask the question. Let go of this drive to try to find certainty. Let go of this drive to try to find something named as an absolute, and there's where we're going to pitch our camp. Yeah. Because all of that is just built on sand. Mm-hmm. The bottom line is that what it comes down to is, to pick up your introduction there, is to always engage in asking the question. Now, you began by talking about ask the further relevant question, which is actually adverting back to the work of a Canadian Jesuit, Bernard Lonergan, and who always talked about asking the further relevant question. And that really sparked my imagination many decades ago, to which I would say nowadays that I get a little concerned when you put in the word relevant, because I would begin to say, well, who's determining what relevant is? Fair. You know, like who's got the imprimatur, the authority to say, well, this is the relevant question, so you can only ask that question. So I tend to be far more interested in what are often dismissed as irrelevant questions. Mm-hmm. But I've said for a long time, the only ridiculous question is the question you don't ask. Mm. Ask the question, which means that you've got to be able to engage in a free-flowing conversation without scripting it, without programming where it's going to be. You have no idea where it's going to go, what topics are going to come up, who's going to say something inappropriate, who's going to burp, who's going to do whatever. You just throw yourself in at the mercy of the winds and let the winds blow you wherever you're going to go. A free-flowing conversation. And I think a lot of work I've done in parish communities is, in fact, to set up these opportunities where the community itself, in large groups, small groups, various groups, can begin to engage in a free-flowing conversation and let it go where it goes, and to see if out of that conversation something develops a certain kind of pull. There's a certain stirring, a certain invitation that happens to maybe pay attention to one thing or another. We can't do everything, but is there something that seems to be getting some legs under it?
Right.
And then, well, pay attention to that. Let's take it a next step. Can we begin to move that a little further? Can we begin to coalesce some energy around that? Can we begin to enact something? Recognizing that whatever it is we choose to do, whatever is the nature of our response, while the response is critical, the response is never, ever going to achieve that which we hope it will.
Right.
And we've got to own that. So,
One of the things I discovered quickly in ordained ministry is that there's a process you go through in seminary where you do ask questions and you do, enter into that,
Hopefully.
that kind of free flowing. Yeah, no, well, I found that anyway in my
I did too,
experiences.
yes.
That was a place I could go to ask questions where I couldn't before because I was just told in the place that I was, well, you don't ask, this is what it is. But what I learned in ordained ministry very quickly is coming into a parish and bringing people together and doing Bible studies or book studies, and someone would bring something up and say, well, what does this mean, or what do you think this is, Rector? And I'd give it back to them and say, well, what do you think? And you'd get crickets, right?
Yeah.
So the idea being that what I learned was that the laity aren't used to having those opportunities just to ask questions, that we've professionalized. We've talked about this before, is that we've professionalized ministry in the sense that the ones in the collars are the ones that have all the answers. So it's interesting for me to hear you say that you've kind of tried to create this space where people can enter into asking questions and let it be free flowing and not just look for right answers from the people in the collars.
yeah. I'm trying to not, because you said a number of things that for me, like I really have a problem with the word professional. I'm not a professional anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. I got a few words I would call you professional at.
Okay. But
I know where you're going.
the bottom line is I'm far more interested in a kind of open-ended conversations. Yes, I'm a priest, but I am fundamentally no different than anybody else. I am first, one of the things, and now I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole.
Go.
Probably one of the most boring things on the planet is to go to a meeting with priests. My God, I would rather stick a pencil in my eye, and because it's boring, it's self-serving, it is just insipid. When you get together with a bunch of
how do you really feel?
Well, I have no opinion. When you get together with a bunch of priests and they're all sitting there, how can we do this, and what should we wear, and how should we process, and how should we do this, and what about this program, what about that program? And I'm going, has anybody paid attention to the damn world? Like, what the hell is going on in your parish? Like, what's going on? What's happening? Like, so you're at St. Stephen's now. What's happening in your area? What are the issues? What are the questions that are being birthed? What are the needs that are starting to come up? Have you ever been to a damn school? Have you talked to the principal? Have you done anything? Have you wandered the mall and chatted with people in the coffee shop? Have you listened to what issues and concerns are? That will start to give you a clue about what you need to do and what your next steps are. I don't give a damn about what you're supposed to wear and what order the procession is going to come and who the hell is going to wear purple. Give me a sash and drop to put on, and and then I'll sing "Nearer My God to Thee." You don't want to hear me sing, but give me a bloody break. If we're going to be authentic, which is a word I would prefer to use over professional, if we're going to be authentic, we're going to deal with each other face-to-face, one-on-one, or in small groups, and truly listening to what each other says, and then beginning to say, so what do we think we can begin to do about this? How can we begin to respond? What would the next step be? Are we willing, do we have any energy whatsoever to gather again and maybe to just do a piece of work here? Mm-hmm. Are you willing to get out in front and deal with stuff? No, you can stay inside your building. You can put your robes on and you can wander around and sing hymns all you like, but you're not doing a damn thing.
Right. It's interesting that you say that. I just had a conversation with another colleague, actually just a day or so ago, about the very same thing, who said his frustration around some feedback after a church service around who's sitting where and when, at what time people are standing or what time people are sitting, what's the appropriate time to do this, and wait till the officiant sits or the bishop sits and all this sort of stuff. And it really is, it's a pointless conversation.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I got to tip my hat to you here, because I understand that you've got homilies written up to, well, at least Pentecost, right?
How far ahead are you, John? Where are you at? What are you into now?
And I tip my hat because this is a guy that on Saturday goes, okay,
What am I preaching?
I got to start getting this together now. So,
Well, that's not to say you're doing it wrong. I've had a stroke, so I'm only working part-time anymore. So I spend a lot of time sitting in my lazy boy,
all right.
which my wife says befits one who is indeed a lazy boy. So I sit there, and you can only watch so much TV. CNN begins to creep into your brain after a
it's
while,
not
and
good.
so
Not
I
good
your brain.
exercise.
I sit there with my computer and I write, and so yeah.
So, no, but that's good. And I got a chance to read a few of them over the next few weeks. And there's one I want to just ask you about
Sure.
and reflect on a little bit. In your preaching for the 6th week of Easter, coming up in a couple of weeks, you reflect on this idea of church and what it might be or what it might not be. So you question, and again, the theme of questioning that we've been talking about, you question if we can get beyond the idea of church as a noun, as a place or a structure, beyond people gathered, and then ask if the church is moving and emerging. It's more of a verb that way, and you use the word churching. And I just want to quote a couple of lines from what you've written in that sermon. And you write, "Churching includes practical and pragmatic questions and concerns about inclusion, organization, justice, political policy, and economic strategy. Churching is countercultural in that it dismantles professional exclusivism, extending the involvement of all in making real the way of Jesus. What if churching requires response to calls stirring within the world?" So, John, can you expand on that a little bit, and perhaps with the thought of how it maybe relates to what you've experienced as churching in your lifetime and what that's looked like to you?
Well, when I talk about, just to kind of work backwards there, if I can keep in my mind what you said, but in terms of the world, the premise that I work on is that God, if there is such a thing as God, and you may want to go into that, but God is wholly, entirely emptied into the world. Mm-hmm. God is not to be found on high, not floating around up somewhere up in the ionosphere. God is wholly emptied into the world, which is, in fact, then to say, is to pay attention to the world, not certain segments of the world, not the church world, not the religious world, not the spiritual world, but the damn world, with all of its warts, with all of its problems, with all of its issues. Pay attention to that. And within that, within the vibrancy, within the hopes, the dreams, the fears of the world, perhaps we may begin to discern, to hear a call. It's not a loud call. It's not mapping out, programming what our future is going to be, the next 27 steps. It's a call to engage, a call to do something, a call to respond, a call to get involved. Now, carrying that further, then I make zero distinction between the church and the world. All I mean by that, or perhaps should say religion, there is no such thing as religious life and secular life. Mm-hmm. There is simply life, period. End of point, full stop. Engage in life, which is then to say that the kind of way that I understand that what faith may be about is not so much the faith, as some kind of confessional faith where we recite a creedal statement, click our heels, and hope we go to Kansas. But it's actually this elusive yearning, this elusive drawing us forward into something, engaging questions, conversations, which then says you can be involved, for example, in political life, and be understood as an expression of your faith. So the question is not that you, to continue the analogy of being involved in politics, the question is not that you go and Monday through Saturday you're engaged in your political life, you're sitting involved as a member of parliament, or you're involved in political organizing, and then on Sunday you do something religious. The bottom line is that whatever it is you're doing, whatever your faith is, how is that faith expressed in and through how you are involved politically? Right. How is your faith expressed in terms of your economic understanding of things? How is your faith expressed in what you actually choose to do with your money? Mm-hmm. Oh, God, yes, he's talking about money now. I knew he'd always get to money. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, how do I choose to live in the complexity of life? Right. Full stop.
Yeah.
And I don't actually, I gather on a regular, I am a priest. I gather on a regular basis. I preside on a regular basis. I go to church on Sunday because it's important for me to do. I don't get too hung up if people don't do it. As long as they're actually doing their very best to respond to each other, to respond to the other, to respond to calls that are tugging on their heart, disturbing their souls. You know that wonderful image in the gospel where, when the waters get disturbed, and you got to get into the disturbed waters to get healed. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's that when things are being disturbed, when your soul is being disturbed, when your consciousness is being disturbed, when your dreams are being disturbed, when your life is being disturbed for whatever reason, there is a possibility, maybe, that something is going on there that you have to pay attention to, you have to talk about, you have to engage in, and take the risk of responding and actually doing something. Right. I don't care. I mean, we can sit around and recite prayers till we're blue in the face. We can all say amen in perfect unison. We can sing a hymn. But if that's all we're doing, if that is all we're doing, we're engaged in absolutely nothing but ideological posturing, which is a waste of human life and energy.
Well put. Just thinking about that in terms of John was with our EFM group the other night, and we were talking about this same sort of theme about what is the mission of the church, or the mission of church, and this sermon was a part of the conversation. I'm thinking back on, what are you, nearly 40 years now of ordained ministry, John?
Yeah.
How have you seen the better expressions of that? I mean, I know we can talk about the worst expressions of it, but are there things that sort of come to mind? And I'm just thinking about now as I listen to you talk about that riskiness and that business of taking the risk and getting into the stirring, getting into the places where things are muddied up a little bit, where it's almost murkier and less clear. What are some of the finer examples of that you can think of? And I know you've done some interesting stuff out at Mary Mag's too.
Well, I'll use an example that goes back a number of years. And when I advert to this example, I'm not saying it is the example. I'm just saying it is an expression.
Fair enough. It's just,
of what you can do. But this goes. You refer to St. Mary Mag's. St. Mary Mag's, or St. Mary Magdalene, is.
Let's not reduce her to Mag's.
Is a combination of two small churches in Vancouver. One was called St. Mark's, and the other was called St. George's. And this goes back to St. George's was a predominantly English parish. Its building had fallen into disrepair. Its numbers had seriously reduced. And then something incredible happened. And I'm quite convinced that while they had a purpose and they had a plan, they didn't really understand fully what they were doing. They didn't understand how truly revolutionary it was.
Thanks be to God.
Again, because otherwise they would have completely screwed it up. Yeah. But they realized that the building was going to cost so much money to repair the church and to bring it back up to snuff that they thought, well, we can't do that. So they were faced with the possibility of closing, but they chose almost impossibly not to close. There's like 20 of them on a Sunday, 15. Yeah. And they said, we're not going to close this out. So what they did is they made use of an opportunity at the time with the BC government to enter into a partnership. They tore the church down. They created a separate society. to oversee what they were doing, because the government gets really antsy about, you're working for the church. So they created a separate society, and they built an apartment building for people with physical and financial disabilities. And they did that. So we've now got a building, I think it's 19 units in the building. And in the corner of the building, in a small corner of the building, they created a gathering or worship space for those who were left. We now, St. Mary Magdalene, now works out of that space. We've got this apartment building that for people with disabilities. We got people from the building who are part of our community. And let's be frank, we're a small group of people. We're a very small group. Our average attendance on a Sunday is like 25. But I would say is that if you see our space, the space does not seem empty. There's nothing worse than going into some neo-Gothic monstrosity that can sit 400 people, and there's 40 of them. And they're sprinkled throughout the entire nave of the church, like there's some kind of seasoning or something. And if you're at the front, I'm sure you both have had this experience. If you're presiding at the front, you look out and there's absolutely nobody in the first 20 pews.
Yeah.
And you're speaking to a vacuum.
I always make the joke of yelling to the back and say, "Hey, Bill, what time is it back
Yeah,
there?"
yeah. What's the weather like back in the back
they're
pew?
So separated. It's unbelievable.
If you come to our space, and I invite anybody who's out there, come and join us. We're a little odd, but
We're all a little odd, John.
It's a space that everything can move. There is nothing permanent in the space. We can put it in any configuration we want to, any configuration that whatever it is we're doing, whatever it demands, we can do it. But the number of people, small though we are, fits within that space. In fact, if anything, the space is a little bit too small for us, but we work with it. Right. So we have already made that transition. We have done what we need to do to divest ourselves of these old, aging monstrosities that are the proverbial millstone around our neck. And we've taken a step into a new direction to do something. Is it perfect? Not by a long shot. Does it create some problems we still need to deal with? Absolutely. But we have made that step. We have broken it. That chain that holds us to a past that says "Thou shalt not," and we try our best to respond to it. So,
Just go again thinking about these sermons of yours here. It's like you're the sermonator now, and so going into Pentecost, we're just looking at numbers here. Yeah, we're okay. We'll charge on. Pentecost homily of yours, you say, if we are a community true to the way of Jesus, we must embrace the way of life, which begins right here, right now, which is to say that we enact the cross and the resurrection where we live, regardless of our confessional posturing. We may sing with gusto, lift high the cross, but unless we live the way of the cross, our song is but propaganda. We may love the hymn, Jesus Christ is risen today, but unless we embrace this world as it is, we deny the resurrection. Let's be frank, says John Marsh. Aren't you, John? You can't be frank. Let's be frank. If the most countercultural thing we do all week is attend church, then we are part of the problem. Part of those structures and systems, both political and religious, preventing the radical change signaled by the resurrected life. You go on to add, perhaps the problem can be stated this way. We may attend an Anglican church, but for God's sake, do not think of yourselves as Anglican. This is so reductionist that we cannot help but lose our way. We are more. Our lives are more than this. The world needs another person risking humanity in the name of God. We can, however, survive rather well without another Anglican. Tell us more. I like that.
yes. Well, I think that's just true. I will freely confess that I've had a lot of people tell me, given the things I talk about and write about lately, that I'm not really Christian. And I say, well, perhaps you may be right. Given how Christian seems to be talked about in the press and especially in the States, I can quite clearly say I am not a Christian because I am nothing but embarrassed, mortified, and humiliated by the kind of stuff I see. reported on, the kind of stuff that I see given evidence to by those who purport to be Christian. So if that's Christian, I am decidedly not Christian. But it would also be fair to say that just given the fact that I am a priest and that I tend to show up in church, I could rightly pass as a Christian, I guess. So I've now forgot your question.
Oh,
I've had a stroke.
It was your business about. He did have a stroke, yeah. About risking being human in the name of God, risking being human, but in the name of God, we can survive well without another Anglican. But we need another person risking humanity.
Again, I think some of them. I'll give you two quick responses to that. Many years ago, when I first started to experience what I would call stirrings of faith. I was baptized as an Anglican, but as I regularly say, I came from the largest branch of Anglicans, those who don't go to church on Sunday. Why
faithful Anglicans?
I've met some of those.
Yeah, the faithful Anglicans.
Why ruin a good Sunday by going to church?
Yeah.
So that's where I came from. So when I had these kind of stirrings of faith, things going on that I tried to follow as best I could. Initially, I felt I was strongly attracted to being a monastic because it seemed to provide an opportunity to dedicate like the fullness of my life to living this out. Now, you may have heard that I have children here, and so it may be obvious to you that I did not become a monastic, and for good reasons. But I have always been a person who has wanted to, whatever it is I'm doing, to give expression and to give voice to that which I will call faith, that which is stirring within me. And I think nowadays where that has grown to is that what I'm interested in is people who are committed to what I refer to as the way of Jesus, which, to be honest, is you got to be nuts to listen to try to embody this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, blessed are the poor? Right. Really? Are you kidding me? Have you actually talked to a poor person? Are they feeling blessed? There's a certain madness in that which Jesus named as the kingdom of God. Yeah. But that madness, while I will regularly go, this is absolute BS, I cannot shake it. I cannot get it out of my head. I cannot let go of it, or it doesn't let go of me. So I continue to try to figure out how I can live my life, whatever it is I'm doing, and give voice to this, to try to make real that which Jesus pointed to. Mm-hmm. He's pointing at something that continues to haunt me to this day. And I'm trying to figure out how can we be committed to making this real. So again, whether you're working at it within a faith community, whether you're working at it as a politician, you're working at it as an accountant, try to make it real.
Right.
One of the signs that I've talked about, and this goes back to an individual who, he may still be around. His name was Bill Gow, and he was a bankruptcy accountant. And he was describing how he understood his job. Because he said, you realize, as a guy who deals with people in bankruptcy, he says, I'm seeing people at their worst points of their lives, when all of their hopes have gone up in smoke, when all of their dreams have been dashed, when they do not see a single way forward, when everything is bleak and hopeless. He says, that's where I meet them. Mm-hmm. And we talk, and we try to come up with a practical, pragmatic plan that they can begin to put one foot in front of the other, and then another foot, and try to move themselves out of doing that.
Right.
But as he was talking, tears were streaming down his face, because he said, this is how I live out my faith. So one of my things is that when you see an accountant cry, know that the reign of God is not far away.
Perfect. That's great.
Yeah, that is great.
That's great.
I think, just thinking about barber, I wrote a blog a while back that said I wish the church was more like a barbershop. It was because a barbershop I used to go to at the time, which seems an odd statement, I know. If anyone has seen me, I'm bald. But I do like to be pampered. So I like to go get a hot towel, shave, and so on. But a barber shop I go to here in town, from time to time, I was going a lot more at the time, and I went in, and while the place was full, it was so busy. All the barbers were busy. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And this guy comes in, who is clearly struggling. Well, not struggling, actually doing very well, thriving with mental illness, is the best way for me to put it. Came in and disrupted everything. He disrupted everything in the barber shop. He went to every barber at every chair, and he stopped them from what they were doing. And there were customers in every waiting chair, and he stopped every single one of the barbers. And you know what the barbers did? Every one of them stopped. Every one of them stopped. Every one of them looked him in the eye. Every one of them took him by the hands and talked to him and gave him dignity and spoke to him as the human being and a beloved child of God that he really is. Every single one of them. And it wasn't a bother, and it wasn't an interruption, or if it was an interruption, it was a holy interruption. It wasn't a nuisance.
Right.
It was something to be celebrated. Yeah. And I that's what comes to mind as I hear you talk about.
Well,
that image.
I think it's
the crying
a
accountant.
wonderful analogy. I mean, I've always talked about, I think every seminary should be closed down and moved into a pub.
Yes.
And that your field
I'll vote
placement
for
is to be in a pub and actually serve people and actually talk to people and listen to where they're at. And I think in that context, you could talk about what does church history mean in a pub?
Yeah.
You know, what does salvation mean in a pub? Yeah. And one of the objections I often get, well, there's a lot of inappropriate things that happen in a pub.
In a seminary, too, from my experience.
Yes, that's true. So if the inappropriate things are happening in a seminary, so why are you so frightened about a pub?
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, of course, inappropriate things can happen in a pub because it is, in fact, a pub.
It's a pub.
Going back to what you said
But
earlier.
what is wrong with having to engage things that are deemed to be inappropriate?
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Because, we're broken.
Yeah.
Go,
No.
where are you going to go? Where are you not going to find that?
In fact, you get far more honesty actually being talked about in a pub than you will often get in church. I mean, one of the things that drives me out of my mind, as my friend did the other day, yesterday, as a matter of fact, is when I get outed in a pub that I'm a priest. And what I get one of two reactions when people hear I'm a priest. I'm either treated like their old married aunt, that if they happen to say shit in front of me, I'm going to
Don't
dry
say
up
shit,
into a
John.
puffball and blow away. Or next thing I know, they're pulling up a chair and saying, well, can I tell you about, I've got this problem. I'm
Yeah.
going,
Which did you get yesterday?
what?
Which did you get yesterday when you were out? Did you get?
I got more the kind of polite, well, isn't that nice?
Isn't that nice?
Isn't that special?
You know what I get when people find out I'm a priest?
What's that?
You're a priest?
No, you're not. No, you're not.
No, I don't believe you.
They'll say, no, you're not.
Yeah.
But to go back to your point about like the response in the barbershop and with the person who was suffering from mental illness, which was a truly remarkable story. But we've got to be honest that it is entirely probable that sometimes while you respond, you're going to get stuff back. You're going to
Yes.
get behaviors. You're
gonna
going to
be
get
messy.
things that are really, really messy. And you're not sure what to do or how to do with it. You're put into that place where you're at the limit of what you know you can do. And the next step you have absolutely no idea of. One of the things we do at St. Mary Magdalene's is that after the homily, there is a talk back time, which if you're a guest preacher there tends to spook you out. You mean, they get to ask questions of
There
me?
shall be no feedback on my sermon.
But we have a guy in the parish who was cross-addicted to, I think, booze and cocaine and suffering inevitably from a number of mental illnesses. So when the talkback came, he was often more than ready to start talking. And he would say things, like that were uncomfortable for people. He would tend to use violent language, which for some of our people was a trigger thing that it was really hard for them. He would tend to make ridiculous statements that, I am God the Father, and people weren't quite sure. And I'll give them credit. They tried to walk that balance of he can be here, to walk the balance of welcoming his voice,
Yeah.
but try to figure out how we can to take note of our disagreement with some of the things he's saying. Like, how do you respect him and yet not let him dump all over people?
Right.
That is really, really, really
That's
hard
the hard
work.
work. That's the
part
hard
of it.
work.
Yeah, it is. It is. Good.
John, anything that we didn't ask you, we should have asked you?
Well, there's the nature of my life is that I walk away from these things and think about 80 billion things to say. But truth be told, most people wouldn't want me to get into it. So
We'll have to do a part 2.
Part 2.
That's what we'll do.
yeah, if you want to get into some of this stuff I talk about, which is not unique to me, but I'm a strong fan of deconstructionist philosophy and the work of John Caputo and so forth. And I'm a strong proponent of the fact that God does not exist. God insists. So if you want to get into some of that stuff, I'd be more than happy to talk about that.
Part 2. When he's back again.
When he's back,
we'll
part
do
2.
God
We'll get
does
into-
not exist.
Yeah, we'll get into
God
that
insists.
part of it.
And in the meantime, if you get a hold of us at the Vicar's Crossing and you got questions for John, we'll send them on.
Sure.
I
And how-
guarantee you I'll answer.
Perfect. And how can people get a hold of us, Kevin?
You can email us at vicarscrossing@gmail.com. You can tweet us at Vicar's Crossing. You can find us on Facebook at Vicar's Crossing. You can send us a smoke signal, a homing pigeon. You can do anything you want. You can scream, Kevin, Rob, Ian, where are you? We'll answer.
We'll eventually get there.
Yeah.
And you can find us this year at, as Kevin mentioned, at Synod at the Convention Center.
Absolutely.
If you want to drop by and
Please,
see us.
if you guys
and
are
please
local.
subscribe and get into our contest and
Enter to win.
chance to win from Aleppo and crossings here and some nice swag as well.
It's pretty exciting that we've got Aleppo joining on too. We're pretty
That's
excited
great.
about both of these sponsors we have. Great restaurants, different atmospheres all together, different realities, both good.
Yeah. John, thanks for dropping by and being part of this. Appreciate your
You're
time.
welcome.
And I look forward to getting together with you again for part 2 down the road.
Yeah, part 2,
Ian,
John
thanks
Caputo.
for dropping by again and doing all the work that we have no idea how to do.
No problem.
And getting everything up and going for us. Good to see you.
You
And,
too, Rob. It's always good fun when we're together.
Yeah, we'll get back together again for another edition of the Vicar's Crossing real soon. So make sure you check in again. And remember, Kevin, to always look both ways.
Before you cross the street.
Thank you for listening. Our hosts are Kevin George and Rob Henderson. Our producer and composer is myself, Ian, with original artwork done by Catherine Olenek. If you have any questions or want to know where to find us, tweet us at Vicar's Crossing or find us on Facebook at The Vicar's Crossing. If you have any other questions about anything heard on this podcast, leave us a comment or look in the description to find out more. Thanks.